Senator, welcome back to the show. Thanks for being with us.
Good to be with you, Sean.
All right, day 15 of the Schumer shutdown. I don't see the path forward. They're dug in. They want to go to this No Kings conference this weekend. It seems to me simple, right? Which is at some point we say, we stop the shutdown, you get the vote. How do you see the path forward?
Well, it's like Groundhog Day right now. I mean, we're going to every day we're voting to reopen the government. The Republicans, and you know this, and your audience knows this, we're not asking for any partisan riders. We're not asking for more spending or less spending. It's just level spending until we finish the appropriations bills. Give us time, like 7 weeks, to go do that. It's, under any circumstance, that's totally reasonable. What the Democrats, what their actual counteroffer right now is 1.5 trillion more in spending, healthcare for illegal immigrants, undo all the rescissions so the money for Guatemalan sex changes and all that crazy stuff goes back in. They want to defund the rural hospital fund that we put in the one big beautiful bill. All that stuff. It's not serious. But I think that, if you really want to understand what's going on, it's really this psychological impact of Trump derangement syndrome. The left has been radicalized, and they don't want Democrats to compromise or do anything that could be perceived as helping Trump. Schumer's worried about AOC, and that's a real problem. And so, yes, there's this No Kings rally in Washington and in spots across the country. I don't think they want to be viewed as capitulating before then. So the best hope is that maybe it's next week. But, Republicans, the thing about it is there's nowhere else for us to go. This is the exit ramp. The exit ramp is a clean CR, and that's where we're at already. So, but you can see the media, the legacy media twisting themselves in knots. If the shoe were on the other foot, this would be a Republican shutdown. And they're trying to characterize it as something else, some sort of negotiation for something else. That's just not the way it works.
Let's just say hypothetically they come to their senses and say, fine, we open up the government for 2 weeks, 3 weeks, whatever. But you guys got to agree that we deal with this ACA thing, the Obamacare subsidies. What is the Republican position? What's the Eric Schmitt position on these healthcare subsidies?
Well, there's a few things happening at once. So let's just say that that's what they arrive at is their actual ask. One thing that's important to note is the Democrats are finally admitting out loud that Obamacare has been a disaster for working families, right? It's broken. Healthcare costs have gone up. They've doubled since Obamacare. The promise was you could keep your doctor and healthcare costs would be under control or lessened. That's not happened. So it's an admission on the first part. These ACA subsidies, these were temporary in nature, Sean. By the way, Democrats passed Obamacare without a Republican vote. They also passed these subsidies without a Republican vote. And when Biden was in charge and the Democrats had both chambers, it was meant to be temporary. It was during COVID. And it was a subsidy for those making over 400% of the federal poverty level. So even this subsidy, this COVID subsidy, doesn't have anything to do with people making under 400% of the federal poverty level. They're just using this as a lever to say healthcare costs might go up and Republicans are to blame. But if you really dig in, this was a temporary subsidy during COVID that was set to expire. Now, if the conversation is to have a discussion about healthcare, great. But you better be ready for some reform there, because I'm sick and tired of working families in Missouri get stuck with some, terrible bronze plan that they're paying twice as much for that they were, anything they had under an employer plan 10 years ago. So The Democrats, I think, are just using this as a wedge, Sean. We could have a healthcare discussion, but the problem is the minute you insert that as part of a government funding bill, there'll be no end to this stuff. And again, that's why the clean CR is always the exit ramp to get things back on track. And by the way, I would like to have a conversation about police funding. I would like to have a conversation about protecting our ICE agents. So there's a lot of priorities that we have, but I think this is more than anything. It's just a political cudgel the Democrats are wielding.
All right, I hate to interrupt this conversation, but tonight, if you are looking for a great night's sleep, I'm going to help you big time. I switched over to Boll & Branch sheets, and my goodness, they have made a huge difference. They are so comfortable to get into every night. I love them so much. I literally ordered a second pair the other night and paid for them myself. That's how great these things are. And you can join me as well. The thread count, the quality is unbelievable. There's a 30-day guarantee, so you literally have nothing to lose. If you want a better night's sleep, it starts with your bedding. Go to bollandbranch.com/Spicer to save 15%. That's BOLLAND bowlandbranch.com/Spicer for 15% off and free shipping. bowlandbranch.com/Spicer for a great night's sleep. All right, back to the conversation. It's not time to go to sleep just yet. So I just want to be clear on a point that you made. Like if you make more than 4 times the federal poverty level. So let's just, for hypotheticals purposes, pick $85,000. You're a cop or a firefighter in Missouri. You make 85 grand. Maybe you make 90 grand. Does this subsidy that the Dems are fighting for, would this have, I mean, actually, that's not a good example because they'll probably get their health care through. So let's just say you're a small business person in St. Louis, Missouri. You make 90 grand a year. Would this fight that Democrats want to have affect your premiums at all? Or is this just for those people?
No, it's the only thing that this COVID era temporary subsidy affects is it's a subsidy for when you make over 400% of the federal poverty level. Okay. And by the way, Sean, and this is why the Democrats know that, because when you dig into the weeds here, it goes to the insurance companies. So the insurance companies are getting rich on this thing, and it's not actually lowering the healthcare costs in many examples. Now, there's no premium. If you're you don't have a premium. Now, you could have a debate. Is that a good thing that you would never have a premium? But the truth is, you have a situation where it's over 400% of the federal poverty level. It was meant to be temporary. It was set to expire. It was COVID related,
right?
And about 40% of the people that are signed up. So there's a lot of fraud in here too. So these brokers will sign up people. Let's just assume that they're all real, which there's no way that's true. And then 40% of them, there's never a claim, but the insurance company still gets the government taxpayer subsidy. So this whole thing is like, is ripe for reform. Right. It's ripe for reform. So if you really wanted to isolate the issue, it's over 400%, 40% just goes to insurance companies. It doesn't actually go to people. There's a lot of things you could do to fix that. But they want to turn this into premiums are rising. You watch, it'll be premiums are rising. Well, premiums are rising because Obamacare sucks, right? That's why premiums are rising. It's not this temporary COVID subsidy for people making over 400% of the federal poverty level where insurance companies have gotten rich on the last few years.
Right. And that's what I think has to happen, my opinion, is we really need to isolate this argument and to say, great, open the government, maybe even it's a week at a time or something, but you've got to isolate the argument strategically because that's the fight to have. I agree with you 100% on this. This is what we have to do. Let me just talk tactically, though, because the other thing that we've got to remember is there are 12 appropriations bills. None of them have passed. Okay, none of them. And that's why we are in the situation we are, where no one's getting paid, nothing's happening. I know Leader Thune is finally beginning to at least discuss starting to take on at least defense appropriations.
Yeah.
Do you support that? Because my view is, why not start doing this? Start the clock, force them to vote for or against our military as opposed to just the entire continuing resolution.
Right. So we've passed several appropriation bills already, which, by the way, it's worth pointing out, my first 2 years in the Senate, Chuck Schumer didn't do any of that, right? No appropriations bills were ever on the floor, meaning we never had a debate about how to spend the money. He just wanted to work in a back room for an omnibus. So part of our leadership election, actually, when Mitch McConnell stepped down as leader and you had 3 people running this time, a lot of the discussion, Sean, and certainly what was important to me was, let's get back to a place where there's regular order. So individual senators from Idaho and Missouri have a say in how we spend our money, not just 4 people in the back room. So that's actually what we're doing. So we have appropriations bills we've already passed out of the Senate. We move on to appropes. If we do that in one other bill, about 90% of all the money that we can allocate will have then been allocated through, by the way, a bipartisan process, because you still need 60 votes to pass an appropriations bill. So that's why what the Democrats are doing is so irrational. It doesn't actually have anything to do with any of that. It has to do with the fact that they just want to be seen as fighting Trump and Orange Man bad and we're the resistance and all this nonsense. That's really what it's about. Because if it was about the other thing, even the Democrat appropriators would say, yeah, let's do the CR so we can get back to doing appropriations bills on the floor. But yes, this week we're going to move to put the defense appropriations bill on the floor. We'll see if the Democrats block that. That'll be a really interesting vote. I think it's on Thursday.
So do you believe, I mean, just overall, do you believe tactically and strategically that you guys are handling this the right way, right? I mean, in terms of, I think you should be voting as many times a day as possible, just forcing that vote, calling out what you're doing. But like, do you agree with the strategy that you guys, because the ball is in your court, like Hakeem Jeffries is running around like he has some role in this, which he doesn't. It's all with you guys trying to peel off 5 more Democratic senators. Are you
Right.
on board with the strategy of how this is handled?
I am, because what we're doing is, now, if we were adding a bunch of stuff, Sean, you could make the argument that we're complicated, that we're holding government funding hostage for some police funding bill or whatever, right? That's not what's happening. Like, we're actually offering the one way that you get back to the Senate functioning to do appropriations bills, and not because these shutdowns are stupid. They really are. The people shouldn't be subjected to this because of September 30th. And by the way, I support structural reform. Ron Johnson has a bill to stop the government shutdown act that would say if you get to September 30th, which is the end of the fiscal year, that it's a 14-day CR that continues to renew until you have appropriations bills. So you would avoid this. So the incentive is very different then, right? The incentive is to actually continue to work on appropriations bills as opposed to this showdown nonsense, right? So I think this is not the best way to run a railroad. We ought to fix the process. But Republicans are doing the thing that has happened 13 straight times that the Democrats have actually supported. The only thing that's different here is this Trump derangement syndrome is metastasized into everything that they do. And I wish the legacy media would be more honest about that. But as you know very well from your former job, it's just they're on board with all this stuff. And they know that they want the Republicans to sort of get the blame here. But we've got a pretty clean conscience about this. We're just trying to fund the government to work on appropriations bills.
Okay. I want to talk about a letter that you wrote to Marco Rubio, the Secretary of State, your former colleague there in the Senate, where you and I'll read from folks. You wrote, this is regarding Antifa. You want to designate them as a foreign terrorist organization. And you said Antifa is fundamentally an international network active in nations across the West. Its transnational black bloc structure includes organized cells in the United States, Canada, and the UK, and across continental Europe. President Trump has taken some steps to combat Antifa. What are you proposing that's different or broader than what he's already proposed?
Yeah, so my letter to Secretary Rubio was to designate them not just as a domestic terrorist organization, but an international terrorist organization. And just one example of how they are international in nature. And the talking points have gone out on the left that they're not actually an organization. It's their politics. That's not true. It's a very coordinated campaign. So in 2023, Stop Cop City in Atlanta, you had international coordination where people and money flowed from Canada and Europe to the United States. Molotov cocktails are involved. It's left-wing political violence. This isn't about speech. This is about violence and the apparatus that's been created to do those things, to drop off things for people, to have a network of safe houses, which is what they have. You'll notice in Portland, what happens is they'll pop out, they'll do damage, they'll attack law enforcement, they'll try to firebomb a federal building, and then they pop into a safe house. Well, that's a very coordinated activity that's like a terrorist organization. And so they're meant to do violence. They are enemies of the United States of America, this organization. There's no doubt they want chaos and they want anarchy. And we ought to treat them like that. And so, this isn't, to me, it's never about political speech. Everybody's got a right to speak their mind, but you don't have a right to harass ICE agents. You don't have a right to try to endanger their families. You don't have a right to Molotov cocktail federal buildings. And so when President Trump sends in the National Guard, what's he doing? He's saying, we have an interest in protecting those federal assets and allowing those federal agents to do the things they're supposed to do, like deportations. That's what ICE is supposed to do. These are human beings with families. And this is just a further radicalization of the left. So the proposal would be to not just be a domestic terror organization, but an international terror organization, which allows you to then go after, especially the financial ties that are international.
Yesterday in the Rose Garden, President Trump brought up sort of this idea of who's paying for it, the funding of it. You're a former attorney general. I mean, this is the kind of stuff that you guys look into, right? It's not a one-off. His point yesterday was, hey, all the signs look the same, all the tents, so someone's funding it. If you put your prosecutor hat back on for a second, what do we need to get at to really tackle Antifa?
Well, I think what you need is a coordinated effort. I was actually at a book signing for my new book, How to Beat the Last Line of Defense, How to Beat the Left in Court, and New York Times bestseller, Sean. I was on your show about that.
Wow, that's a big getting the New York Times to finally admit how many books you've sold is a big deal.
I know it's a higher bar for conservatives, I think, but somebody asked me, if you were AG now, what would you do? And this, I think, is the next front. So I think there's a federal response, whether it's Treasury looking at these international connections between these NGOs. One of the reasons why the left was lost their minds over USAID, being defunded to a large degree, is that was sort of the mother's milk of a lot of this. It would go to some, the Peace Institute or some innocuous name of an institution, then would find its way to all these radical groups through their grant funding. But you got to get at the money. That's what Treasury could do. Department of Justice and the FBI can start to disrupt these terror cells that exist in many cities that pop up when there's ICE agents somewhere. I think that would be an important thing. And I also think there's a role for state attorneys general to look at those who are registered as nonprofits that are engaged in this kind of activity too. So I think you have to take this pretty seriously because the lengths at which Antifa will go to disrupt the legitimate efforts of law enforcement is pretty scary. And I think we just got to get a handle on it.
Yeah. Senator, I appreciate it. Congrats on the book. It's doing well for obvious reasons because I think your message that you have in that book really resonates with folks and it's insightful. So appreciate what you're doing there on the Hill to lead this fight and then what you're doing to make sure we understand the challenges in front of us. Thanks for all your hard work. Thanks for joining us again.
Thanks, Sean. Good to talk to you.
Well, if you enjoyed this content, make sure to like this video, subscribe, and click the notification bell to get more.